Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and Accio headphones, and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 39, Potato Tomato. Doesn't she look tired? Speculation spreads regarding the job performance of the Italian Minister for Magic, Alicia Cassioli. Criticism has begun to circulate recently regarding the Italian leader's ability to perform her job. Employees of the minister have started opening up about the way in which Alicia Cassioli treats not only her staff, but members of parliament abroad. And it may come as a shock to learn, dear reader, that it is not positive. Those close to the 42-year-old witch say that in recent times they have noticed a physical decline in her energy and focus, claiming that they believe the job is getting to be too much for the minister. One employee, who has requested to remain nameless, has gone as far as to say that she thinks that it has impacted potential alliances with other countries. Is this just a blip in the road for the previously popular elected official, or is this the end for Alicia Cassioli? Hermione had been poring over the journals for far longer than she would have liked. Time was running out. Astoria, who had been considered stable for the most part, was still declining, slowly but surely. If she didn't find an answer in the next day or two, the damage would be irreversible. And the last 9 days would be for nothing. Theo and Daphne never left Astoria's bedside anymore, convinced that this was it. She would be lying if she didn't think that perhaps that was the case, too. But Hermione couldn't stop, not knowing that she, in part, was responsible for the blonde's shortened time frame. Not that anyone seemed to blame her, but it was true all the same. Theo had stumbled across it the day he had brought the books. The deaths of the Greengrass ancestors, who had refrained from having children, all coincided with the death of a member of the Knott family. Those who did have children all seemed to die within a short period of time following the birth of their children, as if the pregnancy had accelerated the process rapidly. Astoria had no children, which is why, at 24, she had been managing fairly well for the most part, whereas several before her had been dead already. But then Tiberius Knott died. It activated the failsafe plan: imminent death. Clearly, one of the Greengrass in history had pissed off someone in the Knott family. She had hoped that Ophelia's diary would provide insight, but it seemed that she had been genuinely confused and surprised when the symptoms had started, right up until the final page, where she had written a farewell entry for her daughter. In her annoyance, she had sent it flying across the room, narrowly avoiding hitting Ginny in the head, who had taken to organizing shifts for those not at the hospital to help. "Aw, sweetie, maybe we put the journals away for a bit. I have just wasted over a fucking week trying to find a clue, even just a trace of one, for nothing," she screamed in frustration. Tears burned in the back of her eyes, not out of sadness, but out of overwhelming anger. It bubbled inside of her, threatening to burst out of her and set the whole place on fire with all these stupid books inside it. Hermione's hands came up and swept everything off the table, including the lamp, sending it crashing to the floor and shattering among the books. The tears that had only threatened her before spilled down her cheeks as the side of her hand caught one of the Knott family journals, causing the skin to burn and blister instantly. "God damn it," she hissed, grabbing at the wound in an attempt to lessen the pain and turn away from the worried eyes of her friend. She tried to pace out the worst of the pain. She had learnt over the last week and a half that the infliction stopped at the moment she removed contact with the item, but it didn't make it throb any less. Draco entered from the direction of the kitchen, and after a silent stare-off with Ginny, slinked toward her while the redhead disappeared into the kitchen he had just vacated. "Come here," he commanded softly, but she wasn't in the mood for being placated, so she just glared at him and continued her pacing as he sat on the edge of the now cleared table. He gave her a few more minutes for the worst of the overwhelming feelings of failure and guilt to subside before his fingers reached out and lightly grabbed at her skirt, pulling her toward him. His fingers gripping at the back of her thighs as he placed her between his own thighs with his fingers interlocking behind her. "Show me," he demanded, his eyes letting her see the disapproval his voice was hiding. She sighed and held her hand to her chest and showcasing the already tearing skin that ran from her wrist to the tip of her pinky finger. His eyes darkened at the sight, releasing his hold on her to begin the practiced healing charms he had already needed to use 3 times in the last week. "Talk to me, love," his tone clipped. "I'm just," Hermione huffed and looked at the ceiling. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to save her. I was so sure that the journals would have something." Hermione shook her head and let the cooling sensation against her fingers soothe some of the anger coursing through her veins as well. "And instead, I've wasted a week we didn't have, and I need to save her because it can't be my fault that she dies." Hermione had become desensitized over the years to the number of people she had killed. Even standing by as Blaise had plunged a dagger into Harry over and over again, she had felt nothing. She had been so caught up in her bliss with Draco that she hadn't even noticed the moment he had died. But it was different with Astoria. With everyone else, it was a choice that Hermione had made, a casualty of a war or decisions made in war. But Astoria was the one part of her life that was untouched by the war. She was still pure-hearted, loving, and loyal to their household, and from the very first day she welcomed Ginny and Hermione with open arms. It was hardly the first time she had killed someone that had once been her friend, but Astoria was not someone she ever set out to hurt, and if she had known this would happen, she would probably have found a cozy little cell to shove that old fucker into instead. Draco tilted his head. "This is not your fault, baby. No one blames you for this." Hermione pulled away from him as the tears restarted. I do, Draco, because intentional or not, if she dies, if I can't fix this, then I am responsible. I killed Tiberius and therefore killed her by extension." "Okay, so then let's figure this out." Draco stood and turned toward an empty table, summoning a permanent marker. "It started with Ophelia, right? When did her symptoms start?" Hermione sighed. 14 is when it physically appeared, but she had been sick with bouts of fatigue her whole life. She rubbed at her temples, while Draco started scribbling on the surface, adding relevant facts. "Okay, then we're looking for something that happened in her mother's time, then." Hermione shook her head. Her mother was a Rossier. It was her father who was the Greengrass before her. He had no journal. Draco paused, staring at the information marking the tabletop. "And what knots were alive at that point?" It was 2 brothers named Titus and Thaddeus in their age group, as well as their mother Phyllis and grandmother Ethel, Hermione rattled off absently. "Any connections?" Draco asked, adding the 4 names to the table too, throwing in lines to join the knots in a miniature family tree. Hermione hummed and levitated one of the books she had swiped off the workspace earlier to the table and began turning pages to find the potential information. Thaddeus Knott and Nathaniel Greenhouse were in the same year at school, but in separate houses. Delphina was in the same year as Titus, the year below Thaddeus and Nathaniel. I don't know what house she was in, though. Draco slashed in a few more lines and stood up to look at it. "Is there any information on the betrothals of Titus and Thaddeus?" Hermione frowned and stepped closer. "You think it's a revenge, jealousy thing?" "I think that is a possibility. Some of us get very protective over people that we care about romantically." Draco raised an eyebrow at her. His hand reached out and tucked a strand of her hair gently behind her ear. Hermione fought a smile. "I think you meant possessive." Draco shrugged. "Potato, tomato." Hermione shook her head at the error, but Draco was turning back to the table before she could correct him. "I think that it's worth looking into at least. I mean, they were all there at the same time, right? Or maybe Thaddeus and Nathaniel were friends." "They were in separate houses," Hermione reminded him, but sought out one of the other books. 2 jumped out at her, so she directed Draco to one while she flicked through the other. Draco, admittedly, was faster than her, but that was because she kept getting distracted. Draco, leaning over a table with black trousers and a black dress shirt with sleeves rolled up, was just too nice to look at. She couldn't help it. She felt giddy around him, even in the most awful of circumstances. It really was disgusting. Ginny was right. Here, Draco jabbed at the page in his book. Titus and Delphinia had an official courtship, but it was broken before any marriage contract could be presented. The reason is listed as infidelity. Hermione sighed and sunk into a chair. Okay, so we have a reason, but now we need the how. Ginny sauntered back into the room with several cups of coffee floating in front of her, as well as a plate with a grilled cheese sandwich that landed in front of Hermione. Hermione's stomach rumbled in appreciation. She was certain that if not for the people who had been in rotations with her, she would have fainted from failure to eat multiple times over. It was their constant presenting her with food that kept her going, just like it was Draco's demands that at least every second night they returned to the chateau to sleep properly. Thanks, Jen. The melted cheese spilt out onto her tongue and she hummed again in delight. I think that actually probably helps because it narrows down the spells that could have been used. Draco began collecting the ancestral grimoires and moving them to the brainstorming table, stacking them in a neat pile and pulling one at a time to him, scribbling down pages and books of potential curses. Ginny pulled 2 off a pile and gave one to Hermione, who, between bites, flicked through the secrets of the darkest arts. But even with the safety of her wand, levitating the pages, there was a residual sting each time. The book was reluctant to even allow her remote access to its inky depths, but that only made Hermione more determined. Some of these spells or curses were truly horrific, all of them rare, unheard, or lost to the darkness of history. One particular page caught her attention, and it took her far too long to realize she had spent a good 10 minutes reading up about the flaying techniques in magical beings. But her curiosity had been piqued, and so she stored the information away for later. The occasional scratching of a quill against parchment or squeak of a marker against the table would sound from the other two, but Hermione had yet to come across anything that warranted noting. She had been able to dismiss all of it with confidence. She was about to give up hope on the little black book that liked to sting her in punishment for her audacity, turning one last page in resignation. A scoff of disbelief rose up out of her. Hey, guys? Hermione peered down at the black pages in front of her that were tattooed with white ink, handwritten but clear as a summer's day what it was. Hermione took another bite of her grilled cheese sandwich and tipped her head to the side, reading the information before her. You can stop looking now. I found it. Draco peered at her with a frown. Are you sure we can keep looking in case? Hermione finished her bite and shrugged. I mean, if you want to keep looking, by all means, but I'm pretty sure this 1,000 bloody deaths is it. Ginny scrambled to peer over Hermione's shoulder, reading rapidly, before letting out a disbelieving, annoyed laugh. Oh, fuck off. Ginny turned around and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Draco frowned at Ginny's reaction. I'm not going to like what's written there, am I? Hermione shook her head. No, he wasn't, because she couldn't imagine that any of them would like the solution. No. Hermione took another bite of her toastie and stared down at the words, wishing they would rearrange themselves and give her a simpler answer. On the other side of the room, Draco leaned on his table with both hands, hung his head, and sighed audibly. Okay, what's the stupid book say? He mumbled. That the curse is permanent, Hermione answered quietly. It can only be undone by every member of the green grass family dying, which means that as long as there is a living green grass, the curse will continue. Draco looked up at her with bitter disgust. So when Theo dies, Daphne will die too.